Hi, everyone. Welcome to Curator Chats from the Museum Center at 5 Points. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Elijah. Oh, there we go.
Every time, guys.
Just go in a circle. Just pass the stick to talk.
We should have a talking stick.
We are broadcasting from quarantine, but today we're going to talk about some of our least favorite historical topics. So the first thing I'm going to throw out to you guys is, what are some of your favorite topics in history to talk about? Not just time periods, but topics in general. Anything that I know Hope already knows exactly what she wants to talk about.
Did you see that evil smile come up? I was like, oh yeah, I got this one.
Let's start with Hope.
Okay, so I have a couple favorites, and I'm going to throw you for a loop. I'm not going to mention the one that you think I'm going to mention first. I'm going to mention it, but I'll mention it second. All right, so one of my favorite time periods is like Antiquity, really ancient Greece or Rome. I got into that because I really like mythology, which I think you learn about in like maybe 6th grade. So I've been pretty much obsessed since then. I have a ton of books. I watch movies, listen to podcasts, do whatever. That's one of my favorites. And then more recently, I love Chernobyl. That is one of my favorites. I don't know why. It's just a disaster, but I absolutely love to learn about it. And everyone knows that because I talk about it all the time. I've actually been to like places that relate to both of those. If I'm able to, I really enjoy traveling to places that kind of go with that like favorite time period type thing. Let's see, what else? I also just really like certain historical figures. For some reason, I really enjoy Henry VIII. So I like watch shows about him, watch Horrible Histories episodes, all kinds of stuff like that. I got really into the French Revolution for a while. I'm a little bit scattered. I like primarily older things, like everyone involved is dead. But like barring Chernobyl, that's where I'm at.
I love like the Revolutionary War period. I love learning about that, learning new things about different patriots that were in the colonies and things like that. That's been something that, like, while I've been working at the museum, that's been like incredibly fun to like go out and to have like a new story about like a specific person to tell like students when I do presentations and things like that. That's one of the things I've like loved. But then I also really like the history of rock and roll. I took a class in college on like history of rock, and it's just like
me too.
So amazing. Like I love that. I love just learning about like new old bands that like I may have never discovered ever, and like they had an influence on lots of different artists in the future and things like that. So definitely love that. I was telling Lindsay, this isn't something that I hate, but it's something that I know a lot about, and I did enjoy it, and now I'm like coming out of that. But like I for a long time like had studied like the Abrahamic tradition religions, so like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so I knew a lot about like the starts of Judaism and the starts of Christianity and then the starts of Islam as a whole. And so it was one of those things that I like just loved learning about, and then that sort of led into other religious sects and other things like that. But yeah, those are probably like the top 3 for me, because rock I would put at the top right now, because I just still always and forever will love that class and love learning about it. So
I think for me, Pre-Columbian Mesoamerica.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, I'm an archaeologist, and that's where we live, is niche. Basically, yeah, the Incans are cool. The Mayans, I definitely know a lot about. I took a class in Mesoamerican hieroglyphs, which was basically Mayan hieroglyphs, and I took Yucatec Maya as a language in school. But recently, and it used to be Mayans were my focus that I was most interested in, but now it's shifted over to the Aztecs. I have a few books on my bookshelf back there that are about the Aztecs, by actual historians and archaeologists, not those. That's something that gets really under my skin as a historian when I see something that's blatantly wrong. And it becomes popular culture to say that this happened, or, oh, why? Nobody knows why the Mayans collapsed. I'm like, yes, we do. Maybe 20 years ago we didn't know. Now we do. Thank you. But I'm kind of interested in Southeast Asia. I kind of got like cornered into it because that's what I agreed to do my thesis on. I don't know. There are a lot of different historical topics I like right now. I used to tell people that I'm not interested in anything that happened after 1600. But I have actually, in recent years, gotten into a few topics that I find really interesting, like World War II and Soviet history, especially in the Russian Revolution and things like that. So I have gotten into some more modern interests.
I forgot to say that I really enjoy American Gangsters and Diseases.
Excellent ads.
Serial killers and any dark history.
Really, though, it is just dark history. But I was like, how did I forget to say that? I love American Gangsters. They're like top 10. We should do a podcast on American Gangsters.
Sure thing.
Lindsay's face was like, I cannot with you today. That's all right. Okay, on to the next one.
All right. On the flip side, guys, what are some of your least favorite topics?
I think that one's a little bit harder, but on that same kind of note, I don't particularly care for super modern things that are happening. And I don't necessarily mean current events, but like I'm not a huge fan of just things that happened like super recently, like even in my own lifetime.
Like Chernobyl
happened before I was born.
Like 5 years, 6 years before you were born.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know what it is about Chernobyl that like draws me in. But there was also like a explosion in Japan, and that one just for some reason did not capture my interest for whatever reason. So I don't know. If like everybody from that time, and this is like completely decimating my Chernobyl favoritism, but really if everyone from that time is alive, I'm not a huge fan of learning about it because I feel like it's ongoing or something, even if it's clearly not. It's just I just don't really care for it that much. I don't know. And for a long time, I didn't really care for American history that much. I preferred like European history or really anything besides American history. It's just more recently that I've become like more interested in American history, probably in the last like 5 years or so.
Yeah, I agree with the American history, but after like 1800, like I was sort of like, okay, the start of America, that's awesome. And then it was like, oh, and then like Lindsay, we were talking about how I'm just not like I had to learn a lot about the Civil War recently, and it's just kind of a bummer sometimes. But it's an interesting era. It's just not my fave, not a fan. And then also one of the things that I just have never really gotten into is like, I guess like I don't know if it's like Victorian like England, like that sort of like whole era is just like I'm not a huge fan of, but there's a lot that needs to be learned, and like we've talked about it in several podcasts in the past and things like that like you sometimes will like see a video or something and then it makes you interested all of a sudden and you're like, oh, I should really like look into that, and then suddenly like now you're really deep into it. So who knows, I could be proved wrong maybe, but Definitely not a huge fan of the Civil War. That's like probably the biggest one. And after we talked about it for a second, I got triggered and was like, ugh. So that's mine.
Yeah. I have several things I really don't like. The thing is, I don't study things I don't have any interest in, but there are some things that I end up. So I mean, those could be numerous in number. I don't know. But I think of the ones that I am aware of that I don't like. I'm not really a big fan of classical history, as in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Sorry, I think that's by nature of being an archaeologist. Whenever I was trying to become an archaeologist and apply to archaeology schools, there's classical archaeology and then there's regular archaeology. You have to go into like a special field to be a classical archaeologist, and I think that's so pretentious. And it was so frustrating because so many archaeology classes were on ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and my thoughts were, there are lots of other places out there. Why are we so focused on this? Why is there classical archaeology focused on ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and then everything else is under one umbrella?
Because somebody just excavate Pompeii, girl.
No. To me, that is so Eurocentric, and it's gross. You can't specialize, at least in undergrad. There's no African archaeology. There's no Asian archaeology, but there's classical archaeology. Everything except for ancient Rome and ancient Greece is under one umbrella. And that just makes me so mad.
That is frustrating. I never knew that.
Yeah, you have classical archaeology and you have regular archaeology. And regular archaeology covers everything in the world. But classical archaeology is like ancient Rome and ancient Greece and the Mediterranean region. And to me, that is so pretentious and that is so Eurocentric, and it's kind of gross, I'll be honest. That's the only thing you can specialize in.
Favorite emperor, Lindsay?
I do have a favorite emperor. Don't get me wrong. I still had to learn about this stuff because when you're an archaeology major, you have to learn about ancient Rome. It's gross. No, but at my school, the school I went to, they had 2 majors in archaeology. Archaeology, classical archaeology. I'm just saying.
That is kind of shady.
So that's one of my least favorite topics. I also dislike the Civil War. And I think a big part of that is, one, I kind of have to learn it because I'm a curator at a local history museum in the South. I think people come into it as well with a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings, and everybody tries to slap their own narrative onto it. So I have to put up with a lot of that. Rather than people just accepting history for what it was, I get a lot of people coming in who want to make it out to be something it's not. And then do I argue with them or do I just let it go? So that's something I don't really enjoy learning about. And then basically any topic I don't like that I have to learn the history of. Like, I don't like music festivals. I'm sorry. And that's an upcoming podcast. I took so long to get ready for that podcast because I don't like music festivals, so obviously I don't like learning the history of it. But that's basically any topic you like or don't like, you're not going to enjoy the history of.
Yeah.
So.
True that.
All right, guys, this is kind of jumping off of the same idea. What are some topics that maybe you don't like that you know a lot about? And I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit.
I think my main one, and it's not that I just hate it, but it like makes me sad and it makes me angry. So like if that is how you feel about something you normally don't like, it is Vietnam, especially like. So I talk about my stepdad in these all the time. So my stepdad was in the Marine Corps during Vietnam, and a lot of people died. A lot of people came back like wounded. The politics behind Vietnam are absolutely ridiculous, but we don't talk about it. It's something that they gloss over in school. I don't ever remember learning about it in school except for to say like it was a war against communism. But I know a lot about it from like personal experiences of like my stepdad and his friends, but also in college I did take a class on it. Why would I do that? But like it actually infuriates me. I cannot stand like the fact that we just like kind of forget about things like that and forget about all of those people. So I know a lot about it, but it's not something that I just like talk about regularly or really ever want to talk about because it infuriates me. And you don't really want to like be talking to somebody and just be like absolutely angry and like yelling at them because you're like, you're wrong. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That makes sense. I would probably, in that vein, like of what you're talking about, I've learned a lot about like my sister and my brother-in-law and my other sister live in Kosovo. And so I've learned a lot about the Albanian crisis, like the late 90s. And that's like just, there's so much stuff that like went into that and so much politics and like all of these things. But it's like something that like we don't really talk about very often. And the US was somewhat involved, and now they love Bill Clinton. They have like a huge statue of Bill Clinton like in their city square and stuff, but there's a lot of like really like racially tense things that go into that and that are still like prevalent today that like people don't really talk about it. And so that's for like going off of that, that's one. But then I know a lot about now like the Civil War and like the westward movement,
I hate westward expansion. Like I do not like it.
Yeah, like the westward expansion, like I feel like I was always sort of told like this weird narrative where it's like we deserve this and yay,
destiny.
Yeah, and it's always been like something really positive, and I think I studied it because we're at the museum and I like needed to, and so like I wanted to know more about it. And the more I like learned about it, the more I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Like, why did we do this? Like, there's so many things that happened that are just not cool, not okay. And yeah, it's just like a kind of a sad time period to learn about, and then to see even like some of the systems that we sort of had initially set in place that are even kind of like there's remnants of them today, and we're like kind of still living with those like the repercussions of that, and with the Civil War and like all of these things. And so those are time periods, especially I'd say westward expansion and like learning about the Indian Removal Act and all of the things that led into that and how that affected the Cherokee and how it even affected like tribes that were already in the Southwest. And yeah, not cool. So those are some.
Yeah, I would say ditto and ditto. Those, I don't think those are things that I hate necessarily, except I don't like talking about the Civil War, but I do know a fair amount about it. But as far as like Vietnam and the westward expansion, knowing a lot about it, but it being infuriating, like there are just so many things in history that make me mad. You know, looking at Black history, you know, the civil rights movement especially. I mean, obviously the Jim Crow laws and everything was infuriating, but I think because there's a lot of photographic and video evidence and there's a lot of firsthand accounts with the civil rights movement, that just makes me so mad. You know, Reconstruction, it's not as real feeling because we don't have as many photos and firsthand experiences and things like that. It's not as close. But there are a lot of things in history that, wow, make me so mad. I would say that there's history that I know a lot about because I had to learn about it for my thesis in graduate school, like Indonesian history and things like that were not within my scope of they weren't my focus, but they were influential, so I had to learn about them. That just, I wouldn't say I hate them, it was like pulling teeth to try to learn about them. One of them was like the Majapahit, which was a seafaring group of people. It was a seafaring empire based in like Indonesia and Malaysia and that region, and I just don't care. And it's not that I'm sure it's interesting to other people, but it's a lot about boats. And I don't care about boats. Unless there are pirates, I don't care. And there were pirates, but unless there are pirates, I don't care. I don't want to sit there and learn about the different types of boats. I don't care about more mechanical history, and I'm not just talking about making things, but the very techie, sciencey aspects of it. I don't know. I had to do a lot of research about seafaring vessels, and I am not interested. Or trade routes. I had to learn a lot about trade routes. I don't care. I don't care who sent saffron where. I know it's important to know, but I'm not interested.
Saffron is so expensive, you guys.
Yes, it is. It comes only from like one region in the world, though. I think it's in like northern Iran. It's somewhere in Iran is like the only place in the world that exports saffron, so that's why it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Are there any topics that you don't know about that you would love to actually sit down and research?
I mean, I feel like that about so many things. I always I feel like the podcast has helped me like a fair amount. Like I didn't know how interested I was in like music festivals until I started researching them, which is the opposite of how Lindsay feels about it. But like I absolutely loved it. I do always have like an interest in like the morbid, so like a lot of those performers are like now in the 27 Club, which is like a club you never want to join. So I kind of fell into tangents like that. I also found like a lot of the like religious origins of Bigfoot and stuff really interesting, and I might actually look into that more, which also surprised me and is so very random. Yeah, like I just think like I find a lot of little things pretty regularly that I just kind of jump on board with and read about for hours and then never look at again. So.
I'm surprised about the Bigfoot one. That's so interesting.
But I was thinking about it. I was telling my parents about it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think for me, it's something that I'm like trying to research like over the next, like I just want to do more research about it, is just jazz as a whole, and like sort of the origins of jazz, how jazz sort of evolved in the United States and then all the way like in all over the world. And to see really like how that's impacted music as a whole. I feel like I enjoy learning about music history a lot, but not as much like early music history, because that's like really kind of, sometimes it's boring. But like as like genres sort of start to evolve and change, and the different origins of those genres and things, like those are the things that interest me, I think, and that have more recently begun to interest me. And so I'm starting to learn more about like jazz, and then I also am like interested in learning more about like Mesopotamia and like ancient Mesopotamia and like sort of ancient civilizations, even as far back as like the Assyrians and the Babylonians and then the Persians and like all of that, because I just don't know anything about it, and I'm like wanting to know more about it, or at least have like a cursory understanding of what happened and how the empires collapsed and where they were and like all of those things. So yeah, those are two, but definitely jazz. That jazz is like the one that I'm working on as we speak. Not as we speak, but soon.
Yeah, I think like Hope said, the podcast kind of brings up some topics that I never thought about looking at. I guess not anymore, because I actually did a lot of research on it, was like cults. I mean, I kind of thought they were interesting, but never bothered to really go in depth. And then I started going in depth for that podcast and became really fascinated with it. So that's interesting to me. Something else that's really interesting to me, and this is funny because my thesis was on Southeast Asia, but I was focused a lot on certain aspects of it, and I'd really like to learn more about I don't know, they're just, they say that, the way that you learn is when you start learning, you think you're an expert on it, and when you're an expert on it is when you realize how much you don't know. So there are so many aspects of Southeast Asia that I don't know about through my research, because I spent 2 years writing a 250-page thesis on it, and I still realize there's so much I don't know that I'd love to learn more about. So that's one of the things that I'd really be interested in learning more about. And I'm talking classical, I'm not talking modern. The Khmer Rouge and everything like that is important, but I'm kind of tired of reading about atrocities at this point. It's so depressing. That's been a lot of what I've been focusing on, and it's just really difficult at some points. And sometimes I just want to learn about the golden age of a civilization, just something a little bit more uplifting, because history can be so depressing. The other thing that I really do want to learn more about is World War II and Soviet history. And I mentioned those earlier, which I know a fair amount about, and I really enjoy them. But once again, there's so much more I don't know. Because these are fairly recent interests for me. I'm talking within the past 2 years. So there's so much I don't know. And especially with World War II, there are so many people out there who are military history buffs and World War II history buffs. And I'm not as interested in the battles. I'm more interested in everything but the battles. But I'm definitely behind the curve on those things. Because those are such interesting topics to people that I really want to learn more about them, even though I know a decent amount at this point. So we do have an announcement to make today. Elijah is leaving us. So you will, I think the end of April, beginning of May 1st.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be this Friday will be my last day with the museum center for sure. So.
Okay. You will continue to hear him on some of our podcasts because we do record ahead of time. So I think we have 4 more podcasts that are coming out that will feature Elijah on them. But after that, I think it'll be me and Hope for a while. So yeah, Elijah is leaving us. Is there anything you want to say, Elijah?
Just thank you. Keep watching. Keep following the Museum Center. I know I will continue to do that because it's always interesting to hear the back and forth, and I will probably that's the thing that will probably be missed the most, is those moments where you guys are out in the office and I get to hear the interesting conversations. So keep following, keep listening, and stay safe, I guess, people.
That's true. That's true. Everybody needs to stay safe. I know a lot of places are opening back up, at least in our area. I think Georgia and Tennessee at the end of April, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't still keep safe. Wash your hands.
Social distancing. Continue.
Social distancing, yeah.
Stay at home.
Even though there's no more shelter-at-home mandate at the end of the month, still just take care of yourself. And by taking care of yourself and staying safe, you're keeping those around you safe as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time on Curator Chats. Bye.
Bye.